Hi, I'm Mark Brickley, author of Postcards from Liverpool, Beatles Moments and Memories. I brought along some memorabilia today that I found at the Beatles convention for about $70. It was the 2015 Fest for Beatles fans. It was held at the Los Angeles Marriott Hotel. So I'm going to show you some of these pieces I mentioned in the book. The first one is an autographed copy of Good Old Frida, which is, of course, about Frida Kelly. She was the 19-year-old typist that Beatles manager Brian Epstein hired, and later she became the Beatles fan club manager until 1971. She was mobbed after her the performance of and showing of her documentary at the Beatles Fest, and I got her copy. It was about $20. The second piece is a fan magazine that actually cost 35 cents back in 1963, believe it or not. I paid about $10 or $12 for it at the Fest Marketplace. It has a great picture of Ringo Starr on it, both the front and the back. So that was the second piece I got at the Fest Marketplace. The next is a autographed copy of a picture of Billy J. Kramer with the Beatles. And Billy J. was at the Fest. He sang the John Lennon song Bad to Me that John gave to him back in 1963. And he told a great story. He said that the one that got away from him that he always regrets is Yesterday. He remembers saying to Paul McCartney, "Don't you have a rock and roll song?" So, but Billy was great, and I swear, at 73 or 74 years old, he does not have a single gray hair on his head, unlike me. A big poster, and I'm going to hold this up to show you. This is a picture of the Beatles. It's one of the iconic pictures of the Beatles framed in a doorway in London. And it says at the bottom, the reason this is an interesting piece in and of it, the fact that it was originally came about and was printed in 1963. This particular copy was reprinted in 1981. And it cost about $15, $17 for it. But the Beatles never performed at the London Palladium in 1963 because the Royal Command performances were actually at the Prince of Wales Theatre in London. Now, you can understand back in 1963, things were really crazy, and they were churning out a lot of posters and lots of Beatles memorabilia back then, but it's still kind of amazing that they got this wrong, but I can understand it. So I brought along a couple other pieces to show you as well, but I wanted to say all four of those pieces I just showed you just now, I picked up at the Beatles Fest for Beatles fans in Los Angeles for around $70. So it's kind of a reminder that you can actually become a Beatles memorabilia collector for not too much money. Now the next things I'm going to show you cost a little bit more. The first is, this costs about $100, and it's a pretty rare copy of a Life magazine from 1964, and the story inside features the Beatles' second concert tour all across the United States in 1964, so it's a great shot of them on the cover. The Saturday Evening Post came out with a great cover shot of the Beatles, and inside I was showing Larry, who's behind the camera here, some of the Beatles pictures, and there's a great one of Ringo Starr in here I have to show you. Hey, what a life, huh? Ringo being mobbed by girls on Miami Beach. That must have been quite an experience for anybody. But a little later on in the article, there's a kind of a preview of John Lennon's book in his own right, and there's about 10 stories. So this appeared in 1964, actually before the stories came out in his book. And of course, he also had a second book. This last piece I brought along, and it cost about $85. It's a picture Pattie Boyd took, and it was taken with a timer back in the day when Pattie was in her 20s with George at their house at Kiffin's, which is near London. And Pattie said George looks bored in the picture because he's waiting and waiting for the timer to go off, and finally he looked away. So Pattie was able to snap the picture, and she's not in her 20s anymore, but she still looks great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Mark Brickley, the author of Postcards from Liverpool, Beatles Moments and Memories. Is available on Amazon.com or at your local bookstore.